The plight of the elderly is a problem that is growing day by day without our paying attention to it. The loneliness of the elderly, the abandonment to which they are condemned by their children and their grandchildren represents a pandemic that is spreading throughout the world, but about which little is said. The indifference of the youngest condemn the elderly to wish for their death because without anyone to listen to them and listen to their stories, they feel reduced to mere useless objects that no one cares about anymore. And today we bring you a story that will make you reflect on this problem so that the next time you see your father, a grandfather, or any elderly person, no matter who they are, you will think twice about ignoring them. Also, if you have not done so already, please subscribe to our channel and click that notification bell to get inspired by these real-life stories every day. Now, back to the story. Louis wasn't always an old man. He had his glory days, when he was a handsome boy who aroused the interest of women his age. And despite his characteristic cheerfulness, Louis knew how to be a respectable person, and from a very young age he began to work wherever he could in order to earn an honest living. And so, working happily and in love, he struggled through his youth without imagining how quickly time passes and ignoring how ungrateful life can be when you don't have a bit of luck. Not because he was a cheerful boy, Louis was forgetful of God on the spiritual plane. Although he did not attend any church or claim to be a member of any religion, Louis was a deep believer who prayed every night before going to bed. But his spirituality was quite particular, and in addition to the traditional doctrine of his country, learned from his parents. Louis also believed in some Eastern religious ideas such as karma. He was absolutely convinced that the universe was governed by a law of cause and effect, that every action has a reaction, and that the good or bad things that happen to us in life are the result of the equally good or bad way we have behaved. And guided by this idea, Louis reached old age convinced that his old age would be peaceful and pleasant. Of course, he knew that he would have to endure the bodily aches and pains of his years, and he deeply feared the loss of his memory and the rest of his cognitive abilities. But he was absolutely certain that no matter what ailment beset him, he would have the invaluable companionship of his children, to whom he had always given all the love he was capable of giving. For if life was a system of retribution in which one receives what one gives, nothing could make the old man think that his children would respond with ingratitude, precisely when he needed them most, and abandon him. Unfortunately, old Louis was wrong. Unfortunately, life is sometimes unfair, unpredictable, lacking any logic to guide it. And sometimes, rather than a system of cause and effect retribution, it behaves like a wild beast, devouring any prey that comes its way, regardless of its sex, its skin color, its religious beliefs, or its good behavior. And this was precisely what happened to Louis. One night, he was awakened by the intensity of voices arguing in the next room. It was his son and his son's wife discussing his transfer to a nursing home. Louis was so convinced that his children's lives could not repay him in such a thankless way that it occurred to him that it was all a joke. Since his birthdays were near, he assumed that his son and daughter-in-law's argument was simply acted out, that they did it out loud on purpose to wake him up so that he would think he would be taken to an asylum and thus worry him and then surprise him as a wonderful birthday present. But there was no surprise. The plans to take him to an asylum were real. When Louis was young, he worked at everything he could, was a baker for a long time, and even worked as a gardener for about 5 years. But it wasn't until he was 30 that he found a job that would become his life's work. Louis was mowing the garden of a prestigious company when the manager approached him to offer him the position of security guard at the head office. It would be a permanent job as a legal deal and with all the social guarantees stipulated by law. Louis was grateful for the opportunity, but immediately turned down the position. He was a quiet citizen, had no experience in security, and even less in handling weapons. The manager explained that none of that mattered to him. The previous guard had just been fired because he was caught planning a robbery of a company, and he, as a manager, was convinced that the new guard, regardless of his experience in the security area, should have as his main characteristic to be a reliable and honest person. And Louis met this profile to perfection. He had shown unmistakable signs of this during his years as a gardener for the company. Even so, Louis asked the manager for a night to analyze the proposal, but the next day he returned. For days, he had been thinking about marrying his girlfriend and starting a family, and a decent fixed salary would not be bad for him. From then on, for the rest of the years, he was active. That was Louis's job. The economic comfort did not deprive him of the pains of life, as the man had to go through the ordeal of discovering his wife's infidelity fighting for legal custody of the children he had with her, and after winning the lawsuit, taking on the difficult task of being a single parent of 2 children. But motivated by love, Lewis was capable of anything. In addition, the company Lewis worked for had a complete social system for its employees, which included an all-expenses-paid scholarship for the children of all employees. Thanks to this, Lewis's children were able to attend prestigious universities and become professionals. The eldest graduated as a lawyer and had a law firm in the city, while the youngest became a doctor and worked abroad. When Lewis retired, he felt like the happiest man on the face of the earth, and when his children graduated, he never demanded that they take him to live with him. He understood perfectly well that it was his children's destiny to fly, make a life for themselves, and go their own way. He simply asked them to please not forget him, to visit him whenever they could, and to keep in constant telephone contact. So when his son, the lawyer, brought him and his wife to live together, Lewis never thought they were uncomfortable. It was something he hadn't asked for, and he respected the couple's privacy, and so when he overheard them discussing his move to a nursing home, it seemed to him that it all made no sense, that it couldn't be true, and that it was all a joke. But when his son explained to him the next day that it was all true, that he already had plans ready for the nursing home, and that the decision had been made in conjunction with his other son, the doctor living abroad, Lewis felt the floor open up under his feet. Desperate and not knowing quite what to do, he ran to the garage of his house, grabbed an old motorcycle, mounted it, and fled at full speed. This was really crazy because Lewis had not ridden that motorcycle for years, and the lack of habit in his age made him prone to an accident. Fortunately, the motorcycle, which no one used anymore, had barely any gas left, and Lewis had to stop there, alone in the middle of the road. He had time to reflect. He should not run away from anyone. He was the owner of a monthly pension that would allow him to rent his own house and live with dignity the last days of his life. And it would make him happy because he would not embitter his remaining years on earth by blaming his unfortunate children. Fortunately, everything had a good outcome for Lewis, who until the last day of his life was able to fend for himself, and who continued to be visited by his children who, after all that, repented and asked for his forgiveness. Unfortunately, not all stories end up like Lewis's, so next time you see an old man in need of help, don't ignore him and make him happy with a little company. Hey, if you like this story, give it a like and share it with your friends and family. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.